What's up, everybody? Welcome in to a long awaited edition, not just in the sense that we're a little bit late today, but also because today we will finally be giving our concrete, on the record season predictions and preview for the San Antonio Spurs, Ethan. And the other thing is this time next week, we will technically be in a basketball week. There are NBA games.
Mhm.
Yes, they're preseason games. And, they don't really matter in the grand scheme of things. But there are basketball games next week. So this is our last week without NBA basketball, Ethan. It's pretty good, man.
Finally, Jude. It's been too long. I've been watching people play pickup basketball in my car as I drive by, just envying for the chance to watch the silver and black once again on the court.
And, there's been a little bit of some social media stuff going on.
Yeah,
We've been seeing some more pictures from the practice facility. I don't know if you saw Victor Wembanyama kind of spoke
I
to a
did.
bunch of fans in front of the AT&T Center, or excuse me, the Frost Bank Center. That's so ingrained in my mind. But that put a smile on my face, and that made me even more excited for tonight. And the season ahead. So
Mm.
I'll give a little preface here to kind of talk about how we're going to format today's show. So what we're going to do is we'll start off with just straight up record predictions, for the San Antonio Spurs. What do we think will be their final record at the end of the season, and where they'll place in the standings and why? And then we'll also go through our rotations predictions. We've kind of already talked about that in so many of our other episodes
Yeah.
over the past 6 weeks or so. And I think y'all will kind of see that that's a theme in tonight's episode, that we may not go too in depth on a lot of these things because for the past month, we've been putting out a bunch of content and clips kind of discussing these exact things, like who's going to be the Spurs backup center, who's going to play small forward for the Spurs, will we play Harrison Barnes at the 3 of the 4? We've already talked about all of that.
Hmm.
But we will still once again give our concrete record and rotation predictions tonight. But also, I'll just kind of highlight some storylines that I'm looking forward to on the floor this season. Also, again, that'll be a lot of stuff that we've kind of already talked about over the past 5-6 weeks. But still, we're going to go over all of it tonight and, do our season primer for the San Antonio Spurs, if you will.
Yes, sir. I'm ready to go.
Cowboy Tanaka in the chat says, finally catching a live after missing 3 in a row. We appreciate you being here, my guy. And thank y'all for bearing with us with the technical difficulties as well. But we're here. We're ready to go. And Ethan,
Hmm.
I'm dishing it to you.
Okay.
What is the Spurs record going to be and why?
The record is very difficult to predict because it's very dependent on the rest of the league and the competitiveness between the teams. I think the West is even more competitive than it was last year. I think really the Trailblazers the only team that have zero chance at making the play-in tournament. So the seeding is easy for me to predict. I'm going to go 10 or 11 for the Spurs, just edging into the play-in tournament. I think that'll be around 38 to 40 wins next year. Last season, it took the Warriors to get the 10th seed 46 wins, and then the 11th seed was 41. I think that the league will be a lot more competitive next year. I think there are more teams kind of pushing for that, which is why I think the record will be a little bit lower. So I'm going to go 40 wins as my prediction for the Spurs next year.
So you kind of given a little bit of a range there, 38 to 40. But if you had to pick, you're going with 40 and 42.
I'll go with 40 and 42. Yes, sir.
It's interesting that you kind of mentioned that number, because the number that's been sticking in my head over the past couple weeks, just when I've been thinking about this, is 38 and 44.
Mm.
But because of how the last couple seasons have gone, I'm going to take a couple wins off of that
Mm.
just to kind of account for my bias. It's not much, but what I came up with was 36 and 46. And the other context we got to think about here, we want to get excited for Victor. We want to get excited for Chris Paul and Harrison Barnes, and we can. And when I look at that record prediction that I just mentioned, that's still 14 more wins
Much
than
better.
last year. And you got to understand like how tough the West is. I'm not even disagreeing with you. If I had to give a variance, I could see anywhere from 32 and 50 to 40 and 42.
Mm.
But if I had to pick somewhere in that range, like I said, I was thinking 38 and 44, but I just want to take myself down a notch
For
there
sure.
just to kind of account for the bias a little bit. after predicting that we'd make
That's
the
what I was gonna
play in
say.
last year.
Right.
So I'm rolling with 36 and 46. I had in parentheses next to it in my notes, potentially in the play in, but I'm going to say that that's going to be in the 11 seed because I really like the point that you made at the end there that you kind of think the league will be a little bit more competitive this season and that
Mhm.
last year's standings, aren't necessarily representative of, how it could play out this year.
Yeah, there's a lot of change. I think the Thunder are going to still be there. The Nuggets have a chance to die down a little bit. The Rockets are a little bit better. The Jazz pretty much stayed where they were. The Clippers could fall out of the play in entirely with
Hmm.
Kawhi's injury. So there's a lot of opportunity for change. I think it's funny. I think last year I guessed in the 20s. I don't remember the exact record that I guessed, and you guessed. I think was it 35 plus ish.
Something
You
like that.
definitely guessed play
I
in tournament. So I
Yes.
understand why you're going back a little bit and trying to be a little more tempered. For the people in the comments, I will be the one that predicts with Spurs colored glasses this season. We'll switch off every other year, Jude. We can agree to that.
Yeah, we'll remember it next year. If this one plays out well, I'm gonna be way over the moon, and I'll say that we'll win like 60 games, and then it'll end up being 52, and it'll just be a continuous cycle. Well,
Right.
actually, maybe it won't be with Victor, but at least for next year.
Yeah. And for me, the reason I went a little high, maybe higher than normal than I usually do. Yes, Chris Paul. Yes, Harrison Barnes. Yes, another year of just everybody being together, chemistry, whatnot. But I really think Victor Wembanyama is going to be at another level than he was last year and really be impacting winning, which is what we talked about in the center breakdown.
Yeah. And I'm not when I say this, let me preface before I say this. I'm not trying to backtrack here, but that's the
You're
one
fine.
thing that kind of scares me a little bit about my prediction is just Victor going completely
Mm-hmm.
insane. And as we've been saying for the past 5-6 weeks, not to keep repeating that, but something I've said is, you can't put a cap on anything with him.
Right.
So
You never know. Knock on wood. Fingers crossed.
but still, even with the little bit of a difference there in the record prediction itself, we both feel that the Spurs will be in that 10 to 11 range. We both agree on that, regardless of the record. So,
Agreed.
and yeah, there's really not too much else to dive into with the record prediction. That's kind of why I opened this episode by saying, there's a lot of stuff that we've talked about,
Mm-hmm.
over the position breakdowns that really dove into the roster and the nitty gritty of stuff on the court. But now that we've talked and gave our predictions on the record this season, this is another thing that may be a little bit repetitive. But what are your rotation predictions, starters and backups for the
Mm-hmm.
Spurs?
Before I get into that, I do want to preface it by
Okay.
saying the Spurs will likely do 11 or 12 man rotations, like in all honesty, but I'm just going to give my starting five and then backup five for the sake of conversation. Doesn't mean that the 11, 12, 13 won't have any play time because they definitely will. But my starting lineup will be Chris Paul, Devin Vassell, Harrison Barnes, Jeremy Sohan, and Victor Wembanyama. My bench unit would be Trey Jones, Stephon Castle at the backup two, Keldon Johnson, Sandro Mamukelashvili, and Zach Collins. And like I said, the 11-12 guys that I think would get spot minutes would be Malachi Branham and Julian Champagnie, depending on where they are. They both are very versatile players. And then you can also throw Blake Wesley in there from time to time, depending on injury, depending on load management for Chris Paul, Harrison Barnes, etc. But I think that the first two fives are both very versatile. It allows us to space the floor, improve passing and playmaking, obviously, with the addition of Chris Paul, and improve defense, of course, with Stephon Castle. I think it addresses a lot of the difficulties we had last year while maintaining the cohesiveness of the scheme, if that makes sense.
Yes, it does. And I'm not trying to sit here and just repeat everything, but I have Chris Paul, Devin Vassell, Harrison Barnes, Jeremy Sohan, and Victor Wembanyama. And then off the bench, I have Trey Jones, Stephon Castle, Keldon Johnson, Mamu, and then Zach Collins. The other thing that I just put in parentheses about the
Oh,
backup
Bassy.
lineup is literally, interchangeable with what we talked about last week. But if I had to pick for a prediction, I'm going to go with Zach. Um,
Mm-hmm.
and again, if you guys have been watching, that's not really surprising to you. We've kind of been talking about this since the Harrison Barnes episode. And
Mm-hmm.
even this, you could go back to the shooting guard with putting Stephon at the two as well.
Mm-hmm.
So
The only caveat I could potentially see in the starting lineup is what a lot of people have been talking about, which is Harrison Barnes off the bench as a six-man
Right.
scoring role, and then moving, is it Keldon to the starting three or Julian Champagny at the starting
It
three,
could be
one or the
either.
other, and then letting Jeremy play the four. And then in that situation, I think most people have Harrison as the backup four, which would
Exactly.
eliminate Mamu from the rotation.
Yeah. That's the main other thing that I could see. I think the biggest question about that lineup, if we do, if we play Mamu as a third stringer again and we play Harrison Barnes as the four off the bench, I wonder, like, I almost feel like that means Champagne's going to start again. I know that,
Me too. Me too.
it sounds weird with how the past season's gone, but when you think about the spacing and also just that bench unit with Keldon, and Harrison Barnes and Stephon Castle, as well as, Trey Jones with the way he played at the end of the year, that is something that, I was kind of talking about the lineup we have right now, potentially, or when I say right now, I mean like the one with Mamu at the four that we think, is going to
Mhm.
happen. Um, that the one with Harrison really could potentially mitigate some defensive lapses with Zach Collins. So
Mhm.
I definitely see the appeal there. But again, not a backtrack. I'm sticking with Trey Jones, Stephon Castle, Keldon Johnson, Mamu, and Zach.
Me as well. Me as well.
I also want to say we got some breaking news here in the comments. Wemby's Castle, longtime SSPN OG, says, "Yo, breaking news. I know it's not Spurs related, but Monday my wife and I closed on a house. We are officially
Mm.
homeowners after the first 8 years of our marriage being renters." So shout out to you, Wemby's Castle.
Congratulations.
That is genuinely like that is so awesome. That's
Mhm.
something we all aspire to have in our lives.
Right.
And I are still working towards that, but we definitely want to get there one day. And I know you've grinded a lot, to get to that moment. So anytime you guys want to share some stuff like that, because afterwards Wemby's Castle said sorry, just wanted to share. Do not be afraid. We
Mhm.
love to hear it, and we love to celebrate all the people in our little SSPN community. So happy house giving, if you will.
House
To
giving. There we go.
Wemby's Castle. And then PM 113, he says, "Can't wait to see what this team looks like." That's
Mhm.
really what it comes down to with these rotations. This is what Ethan and I think. There's going to be a lot that's going to play out over training camp.
Mhm.
Something that we reiterate is we're not trying to say that they're completely free from criticism, but we're going to trust Greg Popovich and the Spurs front office and the coaching staff
Right.
at the end of the day. But we do feel like that is going to be the rotation with Harrison Barnes as the starting three, and then Mamu is the starting four off the bench, with everything else kind of being similar to last year.
Couldn't have said it better myself, my friend.
And this is why, man, like we've already basically wrapped up the two main parts of this episode. We're not trying to make this one shorter and not
Mhm.
to repeat this and beat it like a dead horse. But again, if you guys want to hear us dive into more of, the in-depth stuff and the lineups and the rotations, go check out all of the position breakdowns that we've been doing over the
Right.
past 6 weeks, and the clips as well. And I've been seeing that some of the numbers have been going up on that. So I think a
Yeah.
lot of people are coming back just now. So definitely go check those out. Check out the clips if you want to go to specific players. But we're not exactly we're not exactly done with the episode yet. And I do want to say, I'm glad he brings this up. Cowboy Tanaka says Keldon 0 in the starting
Mm.
five. Sounds good to me. See, I wouldn't be mad at that either. And I gotta say, he does look good in that 0, Ethan. We've been getting some pictures. He's doing the goggles. He's
He's
being
flexing.
yep, being the usual Keldon, and you're repping the shirt, man. You're repping him right now. I'm excited to see KJ 0, man.
Me too. And more importantly than the 0, I think he looks very lean.
Yes.
Still strong, but I think he'll be a lot quicker and have more stamina to finish out games the same way that he starts games. I feel like he always comes out with so much energy and fire, but late in games he kind of gets lost in the shuffle. And then we always complain about his perimeter defense and lateral quickness. Maybe that will be fixed. And just kind of having a lean build will allow him, I think, to shoot a little bit simpler. Sometimes having too much muscle makes shooting a little clunky. So
Yeah.
I'm very excited to see him in his new role as the primary scorer off the bench with uh, a consistent role, whereas last year he did not have that.
And I think it was in the small forwards breakdown. I forget
Mhm.
who it was, but we had somebody come in the comments say that Keldon looks like, he's lost about 15 pounds. And you and I just hadn't really seen, too much of that yet on social media. But you're definitely seeing it in all of the Spurs content and pictures that they're releasing. So shout out to you. I'm sorry I'm forgetting your name, but we had somebody come in the comments and kind of call that a couple weeks ago. So definitely shout out to them. And I see we got some more comments here that we're going to get to, but this kind of the Keldon thing that we just talked about, this is the last little thing that I had written down here for the episode. And it's just on court storylines that I'm looking forward to this season. And that's Keldon's year 6
Yeah.
in this new role, whether that he's a starter or off the bench. Again, we think it's going to be off the bench, but you never know. We'll see what happens in this training camp. But I think his role this season, regardless of where he ends up, will be more defined. And at the end of the day, I mean, if he's in the starting lineup, then it's like, okay, he's going to be next to Chris Paul. Chris Paul is going to be orchestrating the offense. I think that's already going to be, a lot of the questions on the floor that we had last year. It's not going to be the same with Chris Paul orchestrating everything. And then if it's him off the bench, we've already kind of seen that chemistry grow, as well as just, us having a little bit more confidence in the bench unit with the chemistry and really the addition of Stephon Castle is a big part of that as well.
Facts. I would say most people need to go watch the small forward breakdown more than any of the other breakdowns, because that's where we really dive into Keldon and then Harrison and our arguments for bench and starting rotation.
And even Julian Champagny,
Juju Champagny, baby.
We mentioned him earlier as well. But the other things, that was one of them. So I'm glad we kind of touched on that. But I'll just read these off and you can kind of, pick from them here.
Okay.
Wemby's year 2 jump. We kind of already touched on that a little bit earlier, but just to see his ascension, we've already seen so many crazy things last year. PM 113 was talking about how he had a very solid Olympics as well. And so I'm just excited to see that progression moving forward with Victor. The other thing, CP3 and Harrison's impact. We've been harping on that over the past 6 weeks as well. But just those veteran presences, like I know a lot of people I've been seeing in the comments, and I'm not even necessarily disagreeing with them, but they'll talk about Harrison Barnes as kind of like a salary dump and stuff like that. And we're not trying to sit here and act like this is going to be, prime Golden State Warriors Harrison Barnes, but the intangible things that these guys bring, as well as the experience and lessons that they can teach these young players from all of their experience in the past, I think that is invaluable stuff. So I'm really excited to see that stuff and maybe some of the things that they can teach them translate to the floor. I'm not saying it's going to happen game 1, but over the course of the season, I'm really excited for that.
Chris Paul is just a complete addition, like something we didn't have at all last year. So that'll definitely be beneficial. Even if it's not the same Chris Paul that we're used to seeing, he will be an addition. Harrison Barnes, the one I saw the most, was like he's not even better than Cedi Osman, who we had on the roster last year. I think he's marginally better than Cedi Osman. I would say even a large margin than Cedi Osman. I'm not expecting the world from him, but as a floor spacer, as a connective piece, and as a defender, I still think he's high impact. Statistically, he won't be anything crazy, but I'd still say that we improved with those two guys, in addition to all the intangible things that you just touched on, Jude.
Yeah, and when you talk about the Cedi comparison, the other thing is he's a little bit bigger than Cedi as well, nothing crazy. But like you said, it's a marginal increase. We're not trying to sit here and say that Harrison Barnes is going to come in here and be an all-star and fix all of our problems. We're just trying to say that
it's an improvement.
It's an improvement, and it's a very beneficial addition considering the context of this team.
Facts.
Okay, some other things I had written down. Devin Vassell playing next to Chris Paul.
It's going to be big. It's going to be big for him.
He's going to be set up so much more, man. He's going to be able to play off the ball more. And that also ties into his defense. Like, as much as I just mentioned that as an offensive thing, I feel like almost this offseason, Devin's been a little bit forgotten about in a sense. Not in the sense that we haven't talked about him or didn't do an episode on him, but I feel like he kind of flies under the radar with all of the other storylines on the team. And it's like, hey, he's going into his contract year now. We saw what he did last season. And again, if we had to pick one player of who we think has all-star potential on the team other than Victor, I think both of our first choice would be Devin Vassell.
100%. And I think on top of the defensive thing that you just mentioned, the other aspect of his game that will be really exciting for me to see is Chris Paul allows him to be what we drafted, which is an off-ball scorer, a floor spacer, a guy that moves well without the basketball. Last
Hmm.
year, the year before, he really had to be ball dominant, pick and roll ball handler, and we saw him make strides in that area. But I still don't even think that's the best part of his game. I think the best part of his game is playing similar to role to Devin Booker when Devin Booker played
Yeah.
next to Chris Paul. So I'm excited to see him get back to that mold of himself, and it'll open up the rest of his game.
Yeah, and I'm just excited for him to like have plays run for him and have
Hmm.
Chris Paul orchestrating them.
Yep,
Um, and yeah, as Cowboy Tanaka says here in the comments, I think Devin had some real pressure on him last year.
for sure.
Absolutely. I mean, other than Victor, that's who these teams were scheming for.
Yep. And if you look at any of the national media profiles on the Spurs this
Hmm.
offseason, it's like, other than Victor, there's really only one guy I'd consider untouchable, and it's always Devin Vassell.
Yeah, and I agree with that
Hmm.
personally.
Me too. I mean, I think we would also throw in Jeremy Sohan,
Right.
maybe Stephon at this point in his career, but yeah, Devin for sure.
Getting into year one of that 5-year contract. We're
Hmm.
excited to see it.
Me too.
Payday, and we're hoping for paydays on the floor as well.
Well put.
But the other thing that you were just mentioning there, you mentioned his name, Stefan Castle.
Yeah.
That's really the last thing I have written down here. Just him fitting into everything and watching his improvement throughout the year, as well as his increased reps at the point guard position, maybe even with the starting lineup at times.
Yeah, I'm not expecting crazy numbers from Stephon this year. I think immediate impact will be as a point of attack defender. Obviously, that's his best attribute coming out of the draft. It's he's very athletic. He's going to be guarding probably the best perimeter guy, at least off the bench, whenever he comes in, and it might even be brought into the starting lineup to kind of deal with some of the high level perimeter players in this league. But what I'm looking for from him, it's kind of a Jonathan Simmons level impact. That first year with Jonathan Simmons, obviously his ceiling is way higher, and
Uh-huh.
we hope he's going to
Right.
be an all-star. But what Jonathan Simmons brought to us that first year when he played for the Spurs, I think at 27 as a rookie, was pretty crazy and eye opening. Just as an athletic finisher, cutter, taking an open jump shot when it came to him, and not forcing his offensive
Mhm.
game, and that allowed him to be super impactful when it came to winning games.
I know that sounds crazy when you think about the context of Jonathan Simmons' career and,
Hmm.
him being an undrafted guy, earning a contract at a tryout for the Austin Spurs, and then earning a contract. But honestly, dude, I see exactly what you're saying because I think about the impact he had in that 2017 season. Even the season opener, I still remember this, Ethan. Him
Hmm.
coming in and hitting that, going crazy, hitting that bit, that almost, I can't remember how far it was, but it was like a Steph like three
Yep.
before halftime, from deep range to drain it on the KD Warriors. And so
And
I think sorry to interrupt you, but
no, you're good.
just to finish up, his athleticism, as well as, you talked about his defensive impact, but his athleticism and his hustle, I see that definitely. Like, I see what you're saying with Jonathan Simmons, like the similarities there, at least for rookie Stephon Castle.
Right, and I think he'll have that impact at 19, where Jonathan Simmons was 26 years old and already a full-grown man. So just imagine where he's gonna be in 5 years' time. The ceiling is unlimited for this kid. And, go back and watch that season opener in 2017 against the KD Warriors. Ended the game, garbage time. Jonathan Simmons
Hmm.
had a great game. He put JaVale McGee on one of the nastiest posters
That's
ever.
right. Yeah.
Ever. So cool. I think he also blocked Steph Curry on, like, a LeBron, like, chase down. Like,
He
he had a
went insane
crazy game.
that game.
Yeah, it was nasty. Him and Pau Gasol had, like, this, like, dribble handoff baseline jumper. Money every time. Pretty sure he never missed one.
2017 Jay Sims is undefeated.
Couldn't have said it better.
Okay, want to get to some of y'all's comments in here as well. Well, Pison asks, what happened to Simmons? So he got a bag from Orlando and then basically was out of the league after that.
He played well for 1 year. 1 year he played well, and then he played really poorly. I think he also had injury trouble, and then
Uh-huh.
was traded to, like, 2 or 3 different teams, including Philly, until he was a part of the Markelle Fultz trade that brought Markelle to,
Orlando.
Orlando. So now they're both out of the league.
You know what I was thinking about though? What's another example? I mean, Gary Neal was something that came to mind, but I feel like he might have been with some other teams. I don't remember exactly.
Yeah.
But what's like another Spurs player that like was only really like
DeJuan Blair.
There you go. Yeah, valuable on the Spurs, and anywhere else the impact was not the same. I feel like the Spurs have had a handful of those guys over the years. You could even
Tiago
argue.
Splitter,
There you go. I was gonna say you could even argue Danny Green a little bit,
a
but
little
I
bit.
I think his he was
He won
maybe a
2 more rings.
yeah. That's what I was gonna say.
But you're
But
right, his efficient I saw the numbers, like, he shot, like,
right,
40% for the Spurs, everywhere else, it was, like, 35 at best from 3.
right, right. Thomas Rawls in the comment says, "Hey boys, first time I've tuned in live. Love your stuff. Longtime listener from New Zealand.
Whoa,
Keep up the great work. We appreciate you, Thomas. Shout out to you and shout out to the New Zealand fans that we have, like Thomas. I
big
don't know
time.
if there's maybe it's just fan, but still, we appreciate the support, man."
Maybe it's just fan. That's hilarious.
Okay, I wanted to get to some of the other comments. I did have one other storyline written down. It was just the backup center position, but we we just put out a clip. We talked about that last week. Go check out those videos
Hmm,
if you want to hear our thoughts on the potential battle between Zach Collins and Charles Bassey.
right on.
But Cowboy Tanaka asked this earlier. What are the things, or what was the thing about Keldon with Devin, Jeremy, and Victor best plus minus of last season? What do you think he's asking here?
I think he's saying the best plus minus lineup for last year was with those guys
Ooh, okay, okay,
on the court
um,
at the same time. I don't remember the exact number, but I do remember that storyline
okay.
coming out.
I think I remember a little bit of that as well. So I'll just say maybe that's an argument for starting Keldon. With Chris Paul in the starting lineup, on top of those guys.
The only argument I'll have, just to play devil's advocate for Keldon to be in the starting lineup, I don't think we saw him. I think when he went to the bench was also when
Yes.
Jeremy stopped playing point guard.
Mm-hmm.
So if we want to try it because of that, I understand completely. I just think that the Harrison at the 3, I mean, for all the reasons we already mentioned, makes sense. It would also give Chris one more veteran in that starting lineup that he knows he can depend on and he knows will be in the right place at the right time.
And Keldon being on the bench would strengthen the bench unit as well.
Agreed. Yes.
I would say I would give my thoughts, but you just said them. So
Thank you, sir.
some other ones. Roseville Valdez says, "Do y'all recommend NBA League Pass or Bally Sports to watch all of the Spurs games?" Um,
Let's take this offline.
um, they both have their issues. It seems like.
Yeah.
Pison said Game Pass was so bad last season, but maybe they up their game this year. We'll have to see. The one thing I will say is I did read something about this. Let me see if I can go. Let me go find this on my phone real quick because I know where I have this. But essentially, what I'm trying to get to is that I think there could maybe be a deal before this season. It may be 2025, but Amazon Prime. Here we go. I found it. Okay, so this is from Spurs Reporter on Twitter or X. Y'all guys have probably seen this guy, but this was like a genuine report. I want to read this full tweet. So basically, what he says is NBA fans, get ready to reach into your pocket this upcoming season. So this is this year. It could cost you about $20 a month to access your home team's local games. Amazon Prime is close to an agreement to stream non-nationally televised games for the Spurs, Hawks, Hornets,
Mm.
Cavaliers, Pistons. I could read all the other teams, but y'all get the point. This is on top of the 11-year deal Amazon announced in July with the NBA to be the exclusive streaming service for 66 nationally televised games during next season. So not this year, but the 2025-26 season.
Mm.
An agreement that could also include playoff games. But the whole reason I read that and kind of to tie that into his question is not just because like maybe that's a way you could watch the game, but also Bally Sports, like their parent company, went bankrupt last year. So
Yeah.
like I don't know, maybe they still end up doing the streaming service, but I think that's kind of up in the air with their whole bankruptcy thing. So that's why Amazon Prime could be a potential.
Mm.
And I mean, at least from the NFL games, that the Amazon Prime broadcasts have seemed to work pretty smoothly and have pretty good quality. So as much as that would suck to have to pay extra money, it seems like maybe that could at least be a better product.
I'll tell you what, you move out of San Antonio area and then you get League Pass. Easy fix. Then none of the games are blacked out. That's what I did.
So all Spurs fans have to leave San Antonio.
Simple fix. Simple fix. Get closer to Dallas, then you become Dallas cable television.
Oh my goodness. I think that is a good way to put it. Okay. McLean Garrett, another SSPN OG, says thoughts on Richard Jefferson saying we will be a top 8 seed if healthy. That's surprising coming from RJ.
Yeah, I don't know. I think he's a little overhyped about the Spurs, and that's coming from us.
Right.
I would say 10 or 11 is a lot more likely.
Yeah. Yeah.
I just think
I
there are 8 teams that are better than the Spurs, minimum.
Yeah. I especially in the West, dude. And we already if you want to get a little bit more of an in-depth response on that, McLean, just go back a little bit earlier in the episode when we talked about our record predictions and our reasoning why.
Hmm. Matthew C says not all games are league pass though. If they're nationally televised, that means they're on ESPN or NBA TV. Or not
Yeah.
NBA,
Or
on TNT, excuse me.
yeah. And I think this TNT still has one more year, right?
Correct.
Yeah.
Correct.
So that could be another one as well. Okay, I do want to answer this one here before we wrap up. Cowboy Tanaka says, which matchup are you looking forward to this season the most? I didn't read it exactly, but I basically said what he was saying.
You know, objectively, I should say Thunder Spurs just for Chet
Yeah.
versus Wemby, but I'm gonna say Rocket Spurs because I just despise them
Ooh.
so much. And both teams got better. Both teams have really good rookies this season. Um, so that's always an exciting matchup, but the fans are just toxic both ways. Obviously, I support the Spurs, but it's just fun to see Twitter.
What I would say, I mean, I completely agree with that, first of all. But actually, you want to know the one that pops into my mind? And I think it's because of the two crazy games that we've had at the end of the season over the past 2 years. And
Mm.
like the Rockets rivalry, like this game will not be with the same vitriol that I have with the Rockets. Like I will want to win the Rockets games much more than what I'm about to say. Um, and I liked what you said about Thunder too, because that's becoming such a rivalry and where
Yeah.
they're at, us both being youthful teams, et cetera, et cetera. But the Nuggets for me, Nikola
Mm.
Jokic versus Wemby.
It's a good one.
That is actually what I'm looking forward to the most. I don't know why that one sticks out in my mind, but I think, like I said, it's probably the fact that we had that crazy game last year that kind of affected the playoff race, and even the year prior before Victor with Sandro Mamukelashvili leading us to a win over the Nuggets.
Mike Ingle in the comments does bring up a really good point. Pistons Spurs is going to be a matchup for sure. We do have a bet. I think I can't remember what the exact bet is. I think it's will the Spurs win the season series, but it's only 2 games, so like we have to win both. Sure, I'll take that bet. Spurs will win both.
This year, yeah,
Yeah,
yeah, yeah.
Spurs will win both.
I agree.
Tobias Harris has beaten us. No.
I forgot he's back there.
Yeah, he's their number one option right now. No, it's not
Look,
happening.
Jaden Ivey unlocked. We're 0-2 against them.
We will see.
Just kidding for anybody who took me seriously. Alrighty, we appreciate all of you guys being in here so much. I know this may have been a shorter episode on the season predictions, but like we said, if you want to go in depth, see kind of our thoughts on the specifics of positions on the team and the rotation and all that type of stuff, just go check out all of the content we've been putting out over the last month and a half or so. So again, we appreciate you guys. I gotta say, this one's pretty good. Let me put this up. Wemby's Castle says Bronny James versus Harrison Ingram.
Ooh.
Just wait for that in the G League. Austin Spurs. I'm ready, baby. I'm excited to see who those new two-way guys are. We're gonna have to see. But anyways, we appreciate all you guys hanging out with us today. And if you enjoyed the content, don't forget to hit that like and subscribe button below. If you want to stay updated with the show, follow us on X or Twitter, whatever you want to call it, at SSPN on YT, at Jude McLaren, and at Ethan_Quintero. We appreciate you guys. We're so excited for this season, and we'll catch you on the next one.